Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me on this introduction to the Focus Workforce Management System webinar. My name is Alistair Slade, and I am the Technical Director here at Chronologic. This session should take about 45 minutes, and the good news is we don't need to do any health and safety announcements, as you know where your own exits are. Sitting with me this morning is Kaylee Johns, and she will be taking note of the questions that you can submit via the chat, and I will come back to those that I haven't covered during the session at the end. Today we will start with a brief overview and then cover the HR module, scheduling in its many facets, exception management, payroll and reporting, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Just going to show you the focus screen. So this is the Focus interface, and you can see here that it's a friendly screen. It's modelled on things like Outlook and Sage, so people who are used to those kind of systems can get to grips with it very quickly. We have words across the top here where you can click and get drop-down lists of things that you might want to do, or you have nice, easy-to-use icons as well. We have an area on the left here which is the tree view, and in here what you see will be dictated by your user setup on the system as your login, and you can, when you click on items, they open up and you can see the things within them. On the right hand side here is the kind of action area, shall we say, which is where we do all the work and we add things and edit things and see what's going on. Down the bottom left are also some other links which are used quite often as well. So moving on to the HR module within the system, well, this is the employee screen here, the standard contact screen. As you can see, you can store the details that you wish to here. There are various tabs within the system. The Groups tab shows which groups the employee is in now and has been in the past, which is useful for historical reporting, because if you were reporting on absences, say, and you wanted to report on an absence when, or a period when this person was in a different group, you wouldn't want it to skew the results. The Rules tab enables you to put in information about how you expect the employee to work so that the rules can be applied to their times and the overtime and other hours calculated accordingly. You can also enter the reference codes for the payroll system, which are the references down here at the bottom. And those are used for when you export the information to payroll, making sure that it links correctly against the appropriate times, the pay elements within the payroll. We also have the Holidays tab, and holidays within Focus can be set to days or hours, fixed or earned, and the default yearly allowance is what gets carried over at the beginning of each year. And likewise, you can manage the public holidays as well, and indeed loo time, whether it's days or hours. And you can see the historical information there by clicking on the holiday button there and seeing the holiday for years in the past and public holiday and time in lieu as well. We have a Dates tab where we can set information and about the start date and leaving date, and we also have a Memos area where you can just put in one-liners which you can come back and you can report on those in the future, but you can also see them here. All the rest of the tabs that you'll now see from now on are tabs that we've created within the system, and you can do this. You can create your own tabs within the system to make sure that you cover everything you need to do. So in this case we have a Certificates tab, a PPE tab, and you'll notice that there are different types of fields here. So you can manage recruitment in here, you can have CVs and offer letters, all sorts of different things. I think we have actually got a certificate scanned in actually. Let's just see what this is a minute. Let's just go and find it for you. So that's the one there you can have a look at. And let's get back to Focus. So all the different places here you can put in information, and the nice thing as well is that we can make sure that not everybody can see everything. So if we do have a confidential tab, then the user setup allows you to restrict who can see in fact this at all, or in this case a specific folder or tab within the employee screens. So that's the HR module. A bit later on, we'll come back to how you can get that information back out when we talk about reporting. So we've got the employees on the system, and we now need to tell the system when they're expecting to work. So we're moving on to scheduling now. Within the system, we can very quickly and easily go into set up simple work schedules. Now, a work schedule could be something as simple as a Monday to Friday pattern, whether you work the same hours every day, or it might be a part-timer who only works some of the days a week, or it might be more complicated where we have a rotating pattern. This is showing a Trickles 21-day rotating pattern, early, late and nights. And if you really wanted to go crazy here, you could set up a 400-day pattern. I don't advise you to do so though, because that takes a lot of administering. But it is there if you want to be able to do it. So we can set a work schedule against an employee, and the system will then know that it's expecting that person to start and finish at those times of day. The hours that actually are calculated are based on the daily rules, and these are set up in different ways depending on what you're trying to do in terms of the hours coming through the system. You will get the usual things, the start and end times, overtime calculations, roundings, breaks, that kind of thing. We also have the ability, and the flexibility within the system is one of its really strong points, to be able to write what are called scripts, which are programs within the program. And that can mean that we can do a lot of things automatically, so you don't have to have more daily rules than you really need. So the daily rules go into the work schedule is applied to the employee, and then the system knows what to do. However, you might have a situation where you want to pre-plan, for example, overtime or shift changes in advance, so they're not exceptions when you come to it later on. So to do that, you can use the rota. And the rota within the system allows you to literally, if you wish to do so, you can literally just drag and drop. So you can pick up a shift and you could drop it onto somebody. So you could literally create your whole week's pattern just by dragging and dropping. Once you've dragged something onto somebody, or somebody's been allocated a shift, if you just left click on any of the empty cells to do with that person, it will show you the shifts that they've worked recently in the past before, and so that you can just select those really quickly. So it's just 2 clicks per day. And if you've got somebody who's going to work a very strange time frame, then you can, that's not normally works, you can literally type those times in as well. So there are many different ways. And the most important one, I suppose, in a way, is the fact that you can populate this whole matrix for everybody in one go by clicking up here, selecting the whole matrix like that, and say populate from work schedule and click OK. And that will use the default work schedule against the employee to populate all the shifts in one go. You can do that a week at a time here. You can do that a month at a time in availability, and you can do that a year at a time in the calendar. So that's the rota. Obviously, once you've created the rota, then you can take a report from that as well, and you can give that report out and put it on the wall. You can, oh, by the way, with any report within the system, you can PDF it, put it into Excel, HTML, there's all these different options at the top here, and you can even print it out on a piece of paper if you really want to, as I say, stick it on the wall. So whether you're using the rota or whether you're using the standard work schedules on the same shifts every week or on a pattern, the most important thing is obviously to make sure that those times come through properly. So if we now move on to the exception management, because one of the crucial things within understanding about what Focus can do for you is that it streamlines all of the work that you need to do to the point where normally on a daily basis, the line managers or the central admin can go in and they can see what exceptions they've got to manage. Exceptions here in this case are people who haven't turned up for work, that's absences, AWOLs, targets, people who haven't worked enough hours in the day, so maybe they've had a dental appointment or something like that and that hasn't been pre-planned, so it needs to be put against their record. Somebody who's worked on holiday, so I don't know if you have this, but the classic situations where somebody's booked holiday and then they think they've cancelled it, but it hasn't got put on the system yet, and they come to work. Work default shift is where somebody has come to work and the system wasn't expecting them to. You can then put them on the appropriate shift. Often happens when, if you're working a multiple shift environment, people swap shifts and it doesn't necessarily get through to the system in advance. Unauthorized overtime. One of the beauties of this system is it can make sure you don't pay overtime by mistake. And in fact, let's show you one of those. as if I go to Eddie Smith here, and you'll notice, by the way, I should have said that if you were in at the beginning of this webinar, you will have seen that actually this is my picture, not Eddie Smith, so you know who's talking. And actually, while I've just done that, I don't know if you noticed, but I right-clicked on the name, and anywhere where you right-click on the name, generally within Focus, you can jump to somewhere else. And by jumping to somewhere else within the system, it means that it's really quick, and that person's name is still in focus, as we use the pun. But we got to hear from exceptions, and we were talking about unauthorized overtime. If you've got a handful of exceptions that you need to manage and you choose to do it this way, you can just right-click on those and very quickly authorize them through to the appropriate rate. If, however, you've got a lot of people that you want to, and you also would like to include reasons why that you might want to report later on, rather, why you've worked overtime, then you can use the authorize option over here. Now, this option allows you to, for a date range, in this case for yesterday, to highlight all the extra hours that have been worked, and you could just authorize them all in one go. So if you agree that all those hours have been worked and that's what you want to pay, you can just click on OT, select the appropriate overtime rate. You can then put in the reason. So this might be things like late supply delivery, machine breakdown, and things like that. That then allows you to look back and see why you've worked that overtime. And you can put a text comment in here as well if you want to. Clicking Save then will just authorize all those hours accordingly. But what we know, of course, is that sometimes when you say to a whole group of people, let's do an hour's overtime, thank you very much for agreeing to do so, but some of them are a bit cute and they do an hour and a quarter rather than an hour. In that case, then you could authorize them all and just type in the hour like that and then send it to the appropriate rate to make sure you only pay what needs to be paid. So that's authorizing overtime. If we go to a misclocking now, that's another example of why somebody might not have got their hours correct, because you can't calculate a duration if you don't have both ends. I've jumped now to a screen where we can see that there's a missing clocking. I can hover over the shift code on the right here, and you'll see that it shows the shift times down in the box at the bottom. So if we were to add in the clocking for that day, so we knew he finished at 5 o'clock in the evening, for example, we would use a misclocking exception probably at that point, just to record the fact that it was a misclocking, and then we can put a comment in like this. I don't suggest you actually use those comments in future, but we'll do it for effect today. And if I hover over that clocking in that area down the bottom, you can see that this is a 5 o'clock clocking in the afternoon on the 18th of July. The original was blank. This was edited by me just now. The edited reason, or the edit reason, was misclocking, and the comment was sack them next time. And that's how you would go and enter a missing clocking. You'll notice as well that there's no, that the numbers have decreased now accordingly against that particular clocking. Sorry, that type of exception, so that you've now got 0 exceptions for missing clockings. And that's basically the idea behind Focus. If you logged into the system and it showed you zeros for yesterday for all these, walk away, get on with your life. You haven't got any exceptions to manage. The idea is to have 0 in all those brackets. Business clocking and holiday requests are dependent on the types of clocking terminals that are in use and whether employees are allowed to do that. But I will mention right now that the holiday request is part of something called the Employee Self-Service module, and that is something where employees can log into a website that's attached to the Focus system. They can see, or they can actually clock using that utility if you wish them to, and that, in fact, when they're out and about on a smartphone, you put their geolocation where they are as well, and you'll be able to see that on a map within the system. But they can also request holidays and see, as in the availability screen, when there are other people already off on holiday, so it's not worth them trying to even book one to save you administrative time. And as I mentioned the availability screen, I'll just talk you through that briefly now. The availability screen is a screen where you can choose from the different groups of people within the system, and you can see who's got time already booked off and who haven't, so that you can decide who's allowed to have holiday. Booking holiday in a screen like this is very simple. You can literally just drag from one place to another, and book holiday in. So if I wanted to book these 7 days here, for example, I can do that. I can click holiday and I can schedule that time in. So that will actually book the holiday for that person for those days. If we were to do that on the calendar, we would also see that they've had too many holidays now because it's gone into the -19, the red bracket, so they shouldn't be allowed to have those holidays. You can either delete those holidays in here where you first created them or in the calendar itself in the same way. Actually, it's probably easier if I do it from the availability screen. Okay, we'll just delete those off in the same way that we added them. Okay, that's the availability screen. The calendar screen as well, we should make a note that you can see on here all the different things that's been going on. You can choose to include things or not on this screen to make it simpler for you if you wish to do so. And you'll notice that the key is dynamic and it just fills in what you've got showing at the time. So you can make sure that you are not overloaded with information. You can already see this person's got too many holidays booked. Oh, it's that Eddie Smith bloke again. And that's the calendar. You'll notice as well that the black days are the days when they're expected to work and the red crossed out days are the days when they're not. So we've managed some exceptions. We've seen how we can book holidays, and now we're going to look and see how we can get information back out of the system. Remember, the watchword of focus is flexibility. That's flexibility with you creating, if you wish to do so, the HR module. And part of that flexibility is based on the fact that, for example, if we have dates in the employee screens, which is in this case, you can see here we've got the forklift truck date in here, and don't forget that these could be any dates. We happen to be showing you today forklift truck, DBS, hygiene. You could also have appraisal dates in here. You can have basically any date you wish. In fact, within these screens you can have dates, text fields, number fields, paths to, you can have folders where information is already being stored. If you have folders on your server that you already have data in, you can have a link to those folders. Or you can have a link like the one I showed you earlier on with the certificate that actually is a place where the document itself is within the database, so it's really easy to access it like that. You can also have list fields where you can choose between different bits of information, particularly useful to make sure people don't misspell things. So these are classed as the employee reports. And while we're talking about that, and in this case, for example, here's the forklift truck report. So in this case, what we've done is we've added a field, as you could with any date field that you wish to do so, to the system. As soon as you add that field, it is available in the list of fields within the system, and you can choose it to go onto one of these reports. You can also filter by the dates that you've added. And here we can see training course expiry dates, goggle issue dates, hard hat expiry, etc. So you have all those different sorts of dates if you wish to. You can filter by them. And you'll notice here that, of course, I've actually saved this. So you can change the settings in here and save this as a template, and then they appear in this list over here. Like a lot of things within the system, you can then report on it. And remember, you can save this off as a PDF if you wish to email it to somebody, or in fact with Enterprise, you can email that directly from this screen, and that will send it out to the people who you want to send it to very quickly. You can also print it to a piece of paper, of course, let's not forget that. You can also pick in here any of the different bits of information that are set within the system for people, and this includes things like the rota work schedule. And in fact, if we just click on the drop down, you'll see that all of the list of items that are available for you to choose from. Very simple and easy to set up. Again, save it as a template. So that's using the information from the employee screens, and in fact I will just quickly mention, I meant to mention it just then, you can actually save this as a CSV file as well. So if you need this information for other systems as well, you can export it into CSV format as well. So that's information and reporting on the things that come from within the employee screen. The other reports within the system are things like absence periods. So in this is a very powerful report, and what it, reporting feature, and what it enables us to do here is choose specific periods, totals by employee or group averages of just about anything within the system. So here we can choose specific absence reasons or types or a mixture of those things by choosing the multiple absence and ticking the ones that we want. Once you've selected those things, you can also filter by group, so you can choose a specific group of people if you wish to do so, rather than everybody. And you can also put in extra filters here to be able to actually say things like, well, I only want those that have had more than 3 days absence or something like that. And again, you can save the template so that you can use that again. Lots of different predetermined date ranges for you to use, as well as being able to select a specific date range if you wanted to. Likewise, this month, last month, this year, and all those kind of things as well. Very powerful reporting tool. So that's the absence periods. If you have the enterprise version of the system, then you will have a set of My Reports, which are a set of extra reports that come with enterprise, and you can actually create your own. It does take a bit of knowledge of the background parts of the system, and we're quite happy to help with that. You can create your own reports as well using the report generator. The other interesting reports within the system are things like the Bradford factor, the raw clockings, so you can actually see what the actual clockings coming and going were. Clockings for access. The Focus Pro and Focus Enterprise systems have the ability to have door controllers attached to the system so that employees can use their fob to access doors and gates, as well as clock in and out. Very handy if you want to keep all your data in one place and run a very efficient system. The Clockings Edits report is to be able to, if you have your line managers doing editing of employee data on the system, you can run a report there to show you who's been editing the system, editing the employee data within the system on the timesheets. The cost variance report, if you plan ahead or if you use the standard work schedules, you'll be able to see the hours, and if you put in the hourly rates, the costs of employee labour, and you'll be able to see how that compares to what you planned when they've worked it and the overtime has been authorised. If you're using FlexiTime, then you can have reports on the FlexiTime balances and FlexiTime exceptions and the periods. FlexiTime within the system is very powerful and fits with just about any FlexiTime system that we've come across so far, even to the extent where, for example, we have customers where the excess of the FlexiTime, the cut-off as it's called, it moves into a toil bucket so that employees can use that as toil if that's been authorised, or indeed paid as overtime, as it sometimes is. So very powerful capabilities within the system. Holidays, very quick holiday report showing you start and end balances, what's been taken, what's been booked. Quite useful to take as the year goes through to make sure that you're not going to end up with all your holiday happening in December, as we know happens sometimes. Things like infringements, so how many people are late in, early out, and that kind of thing. And we can have, there's a graphic built into that report as well, so that you can see lots of different things going on, depending on who's been doing what. One of the nicest reports within the system, I say nicest, I don't know, it depends what your point of view is, I suppose, but the nice one here is the lateness report, because that actually shows you the people that have been late in the period that you take, and actually how many minutes have been lost due to that lateness. And obviously you can filter that by group. You can look at it with inside or outside grace, and in fact including those or not that have been authorised, because you can authorise lateness if somebody is going to pick things up on the way to work and things like that. Logged in users tells us who's actually logged into the system at this moment in time, and the memos report is that one we talked about where we have the memo that I created back on my screen, and to put a date range in, enough to get us the memo. That's when I put it in. There it is. So you can go back and you can report on the one-liners that were put into the memos within the HR system as well. And of course, there is the payroll report, which I suppose for most people is the final outcome of a system like this. And this report allows you to report on the hours worked across either by week, by date, or on a single day if you wish to do so. So it fits with any type of payroll system, whether you're doing it on monthly or 445 or weekly or bi-weekly. And in this instance, we can see that there are various bits of information available, and we can choose what we show. So, for example, for some exports, you need to include zeros because you want to override all the hours that have been there before, because you want to create an export. And this information can be exported in many different formats. These just happen to be the built-in ones in terms of the payroll systems, but generally we can create any particular export that you need to get this to import into your payroll. And of course, you do have the option to print that out, so you've got it on a piece of paper as well if you want to, and you can choose which columns show here on this printout, and indeed you can just email this to a payroll bureau if that's what you do at the moment. So that's the payroll hours. We can actually see here, you'll notice that there is some unauthorized overtime here, which may or may not be something that needs to be dealt with. So it's an easy way as well of seeing an overview of what's happened on the week. And if you wanted to pick up a specific person, you can do a detail, more than one person actually come to that, you can do a detailed report as well. And that will show you all the in and out clockings as well, and things like that. That's a payroll report. You get the other reports, things like timesheets, totals by employee, totals by week. Who's in allows you to see who was in at a specific time in the past, and the working time regulations allows you to do the averaging of hours across the weeks, which is useful for doing the 12-week holiday average, as well as obviously the working time directive, although the current situation in terms of politics, who knows where that's going to go. Okay, so that is pretty much everything in terms of the system. I've already mentioned the fact that access control is available from within the system. The employee self-service is the one where employees can log in online and request holiday and look at their hours if you wish them to do so. They can even clock in and out, and it will be geolocated as well. There is a workflow module, and the workflow is something that can really help with automation. It allows in the system with Enterprise to email managers to say these are the exceptions that you need to deal with on a daily basis, for example. It can also use any of the dates that are within the employee forms within the system to email managers and responsible people at the time, or in advance, of course, to make sure that things like forklift truck certificates and hygiene certificates and things like that, that there's time to get people on courses before they run out. That's the workflow module. And there is also the focus attendance board, which is a bit like the watch screen, which is something I haven't shown you yet, so let's have a quick look at that. And the watch screen is a screen that shows you literally who's here right now and when they clocked in. This screen can be run just on its own, for example on a receptionist's computer, so that they can see who's in right now, so they can direct calls accordingly, and they'll know that people aren't available to take calls if they're not in the building. The focus attendance board is a glorified version of that, which allows you to see in terms of what's happening during the day. You get a rolling shift pattern, so if you've got your shifts rolling through the day, it's a bit like planes arriving on an arrival board. Everybody arriving with their reasons for absence and that sort of thing. We can also run a fire roll call from this system. You can do that either with a shortcut on the desktop, an icon on this screen. If we've got a printer defined, which we don't at the moment, it would appear just to the right here of the watch screen. And you can also have your fire alarm panel wired into the clocking terminals, depending on the type of clocking terminal you've got, or into a special interface, which will allow you to automatically print off the fire roll call in the event of a fire alarm. And we have customers that print that off onto multiple printers, in fact on multiple sites. If they have two sites close to each other but some distance apart, they can print it onto the other site very efficiently. So just looking at the icons, making sure I've covered everything. The backup is simply that, means of backing up and restoring your data, although that's generally done in the SQL database. That's one thing I should mention. This is a modern system using a modern SQL database, so not some of the older versions of database that were around in the past. And the downloading of the data is done generally automatically. So that's done by the server, and that collects the information. So this real-time board here, in terms of who's here right now, is literally correct within seconds of anybody clocking in and out. Okay, so I trust you'll have I've answered some of the questions. I don't know if we've got any more questions that haven't been covered. No, looks pretty good so far on the list that we've got here. So if I could just recap briefly then, we've looked at the employee module. We've looked at how to schedule using standard work schedules or the rota. We've looked at managing exceptions, and we've looked at the payroll and reporting aspects of the system. So unless there's any questions that you'd like to type in that I haven't covered, I'll just briefly keep talking for a moment in case anybody wants to type in any last minute questions. I don't think there's much more to add, apart from to thank you very much for joining me this morning and for spending the time to have a look at the Focus Workforce Management System. If you've got any questions that you would like to place after the webinar is over, we have recorded this and we will make that recording available to you, so feel free to avail yourself of that or pass it on to others who you think might be interested. And if you have any specific requirements or questions for your own environment or how you particularly work that I haven't covered today, then I'm quite happy to go through that with people as well. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for attending, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much indeed.